She waited 10 years to hear the sound of her baby's first cry, and when it finally happened, it carried the echo of a love she thought she had lost forever. Maya Bennett was 49 years old when she held her daughter in her arms for the very first time. For most women, becoming a mother at that age might seem unusual. For Maya, it felt like a miracle that had traveled across a decade of grief, doubt, and unanswered prayers. Years earlier, Maya had been a familiar face on television. She had small but memorable roles in popular crime dramas and sitcoms. The lights, the cameras, the red carpets, that had once been her world. But behind the scenes, her real world was much quieter and much more precious. It revolved around one person, her husband, Daniel. Daniel wasn't famous. He didn't need to be. He had a warm laugh, kind eyes, and a way of making Maya feel safe even on her worst days. They met at a charity event, completely by accident. Maya had almost skipped that evening because she was exhausted from filming. Daniel had been dragged there by a friend. One spilled drink, one awkward apology, and something beautiful began. They married 2 years later. But just when they started talking seriously about having children, life threw them a devastating blow. Daniel began having severe headaches. At first, they brushed it off as stress, but the headaches didn't stop. They grew worse. Tests followed, then more tests. And then came the diagnosis. A brain tumor. The word hung in the air like a storm cloud that refused to move. Doctors moved quickly, surgeries were scheduled, treatments began. The future that once looked wide and open suddenly felt narrow and fragile. During one of the hospital visits in 2008, a doctor gently suggested something they had never seriously considered before. "If you still want children someday," the doctor said carefully, "it might be wise to preserve Daniel's sperm before we begin aggressive treatment." It was a strange conversation to have in the middle of so much fear. But Maya and Daniel held hands and made the decision together. They weren't ready to let go of their dream of becoming parents. Even if they didn't know what tomorrow would bring, they froze his sperm. At the time, it felt like a backup plan they would never need. They were wrong. Despite surgeries and treatments, Daniel's condition worsened. Maya became his full-time caregiver. She learned how to read medical charts, how to manage medications, how to stay strong when everything inside her was breaking. For 2 years, she fought alongside him. But love, no matter how powerful, cannot always defeat illness. Daniel passed away on a quiet autumn morning. Maya was holding his hand when he took his final breath. Her world went silent. The months after his passing were a blur. The house felt too big, too empty. She would catch herself turning to tell him something, only to remember he wasn't there. Friends encouraged her to move forward. "You're still young," they said. "You can find love again." But grief doesn't follow a schedule. It doesn't disappear because someone says it should. Years passed. Maya focused on small acting projects, but more often she found herself caring for other family members. Her mother became ill. An uncle needed daily support. Caregiving became a strange kind of purpose for her, maybe because it made her feel close to Daniel again. Still, there was one dream she kept tucked away in her heart: motherhood. She had experienced heartbreak before Daniel's illness too. In her 30s, she had suffered 5 miscarriages. Each one had left a quiet scar. After Daniel died, the idea of trying again felt impossible. Until one night, just before her 48th birthday, she was sitting alone in her living room, flipping through old photo albums. There was Daniel smiling at the beach, Daniel holding her hand at the hospital, Daniel laughing over burnt pancakes in their tiny first apartment. And suddenly she remembered the frozen sperm. It had been over 10 years. The thought scared her. Could she really do this alone? Could she raise a child without Daniel beside her? What would people say? For weeks, she wrestled with the idea. Some days she felt brave. Other days she felt foolish. But one question kept coming back to her. If I don't try, will I regret it forever? After many sleepless nights and long conversations with close friends, Maya made an appointment at a fertility clinic. Walking into that building alone was one of the hardest things she had ever done. Her hands trembled as she filled out forms. Her heart pounded as doctors explained the process. At 48, pregnancy carried risks. There were no guarantees, but Maya had spent years living with what if. She was ready to live with hope instead. The first attempt failed. The second attempt brought complications. There were moments when she almost quit. The emotional roller coaster was exhausting. Hormones, injections, appointments. Waiting. Always waiting. But something inside her refused to give up. Then one quiet morning, she stared at a small test in her bathroom. 2 lines. Positive. She sat on the floor and cried. Not the loud, dramatic kind of cry. It was a soft, trembling release of 10 years of grief and longing. I did it, she whispered. Pregnancy at 49 was not easy. Doctors monitored her closely. Friends checked in daily. There were nights she lay awake, feeling both excitement and fear. What if something went wrong? What if she wasn't strong enough? But every time she felt the baby move, she felt Daniel's memory surrounding her. Not as sadness, but as presence. As the months passed, her support circle grew stronger. Her best friend, Marcus, promised to be there at every appointment. Her sister rearranged her schedule to help prepare the nursery. Even Daniel's family embraced the decision with open arms. This is his legacy, his mother said through tears, and yours. Finally, in early February, labor began. It wasn't smooth. Doctors decided to induce her, but her body resisted. Hours turned into a long, exhausting day. Machines beeped, nurses moved quickly. Maya felt fear creeping in. Then the doctors made a decision. Emergency C-section. She had always imagined holding her baby immediately after a natural birth. Instead, she was rushed into surgery under bright lights and sterile air. Her heart pounded harder than ever. She was terrified. But Marcus stood beside her, holding her hand tightly. You've come too far, he whispered. You've got this. And then, a cry, strong, clear, alive. At 6:12 in the evening, a baby girl entered the world, weighing just over 7 pounds and stretching nearly 20 inches long. They named her Aria Grace. When the nurse gently placed Aria near her face, Maya felt time collapse. 10 years of waiting. 10 years of loss. 10 years of wondering if this day would ever come. It's you, she whispered through tears. Skin-to-skin contact looked a little different after surgery, but it still happened. And when Aria's tiny fingers wrapped around Maya's, everything else faded. The pain, the fear, the loneliness, all replaced by one overwhelming feeling: love. Recovery was slower because of the surgery, but Maya didn't complain. Every sleepless night felt like a gift. Every tiny cry felt like proof that miracles can arrive late. But they still arrive. Friends and family filled her hospital room with flowers and quiet laughter. Daniel's photo sat on the bedside table. He would be so proud, someone said softly. Maya believed it. Motherhood didn't feel foreign to her. Years of caregiving had prepared her in ways she didn't realize. She quickly learned Aria's different cries: hungry, sleepy, uncomfortable. She noticed the small expressions on her daughter's face and understood what they meant. She's my little angel, Maya told a close friend, and I'm finally home. Now, when people ask her why she chose this path, she doesn't hesitate. Because dreams don't expire, she says. She knows the journey wasn't simple. It was filled with doubt, setbacks, and moments of deep fear. But it was also filled with courage and hope. Before we continue deeper into this incredible journey, if this story touches your heart even a little, Take a moment to like this video and subscribe to the channel. Your support helps us share more real stories of strength and second chances. As Maya rocks baby Arya to sleep each night, she sometimes looks up and whispers into the quiet room, "We did it." And maybe, somewhere beyond what we can see, Daniel is smiling. Because sometimes love doesn't end. It waits. And sometimes, if you refuse to give up, it comes back to you in the most beautiful way imaginable. And this is only the beginning. The first night at home was not peaceful. It was not calm. It was not like the soft, glowing motherhood scenes Maya had imagined during pregnancy. It was loud. Arya cried almost every 2 hours. The house that had once felt painfully silent after Daniel's death was now filled with tiny, powerful sounds. And strangely, Maya loved it. She hadn't slept properly in days. Her body was still recovering from surgery. Every time she stood up, there was a sharp reminder of the C-section. But when she looked at her daughter's face, wrapped in a soft white blanket, none of it felt heavy. Still, reality began to settle in. She was alone. Not emotionally. Her friends and family were supportive, but physically. When the crying started at 3 a.m., there was no husband beside her to say, "I'll get this one." There was no one to laugh with over diaper disasters. No one to trade exhausted glances with across the room. That truth hit her hardest on the 4th night. Arya wouldn't stop crying. Maya had fed her, changed her, burped her. She walked slowly across the living room, rocking gently, whispering lullabies she barely remembered from childhood. "Please, sweetheart, please," she murmured. Tears filled her eyes. For a moment doubt crept in. Did I make a mistake? Can I really do this alone? And just as quickly as the doubt came, something shifted. Arya's crying softened, her tiny body relaxed. She looked up at Maya with wide, searching eyes, as if studying her face, and in that moment, Maya felt it. Connection, not fear, not regret. Strength. "I've got you," she whispered firmly this time, "no matter what." The weeks that followed were a blur of feeding schedules, doctor visits, and learning curves. At 49, Maya knew her energy wasn't what it had been at 29. Her back ached, her incision healed slowly. But her determination was stronger than ever. Friends rotated shifts to help her in the early days. Her sister stayed for 2 weeks. Marcus practically moved into the guest room for a while, handling groceries and laundry. But eventually, the house quieted again. This time not from loneliness, but from routine. Maya and Arya began finding their rhythm. Morning sunlight would spill through the kitchen window. As Maya held her daughter close while making tea, she'd talk to her constantly. "That's the kettle, baby girl, and this," she'd say softly, touching Arya's nose, "is your brave little face." She wanted Arya to grow up knowing her story, not as something sad, but as something powerful. One afternoon, about a month after the birth, Maya received a message on social media. She rarely checked it anymore, but something told her to open it. It was from a woman she didn't know. "I heard your story through a mutual friend," the message read. "I'm 46 and scared to try for a baby alone, but seeing what you did gives me hope." Maya stared at the screen. She hadn't realized her decision would ripple outward. Over the next few weeks, more messages arrived. Women in their 40s, widows, divorcees, women who thought their time had passed. "You inspired me. You gave me courage. I'm booking a consultation because of you." Maya felt overwhelmed, in the best way. For years she had carried grief quietly. Now, somehow, her journey was lighting a small path for others. But not everyone reacted positively. At a routine pediatric visit, a nurse casually asked, "Grandma visiting today?" The comment wasn't meant to be cruel, but it stung. "No," Maya replied calmly, "I'm her mother." The nurse apologized quickly, embarrassed, but the moment lingered in Maya's mind long after they left. Later that night, she stood in front of the mirror, holding Arya against her chest. Grey strands had begun appearing in her hair. Fine lines framed her eyes. She looked older. Then Arya stretched her tiny hand up and grabbed a piece of Maya's hair, smiling in that unpredictable newborn way. And Maya laughed. "I may be older," she said softly, "but I'm also stronger." Age wasn't her weakness, it was her story. As months passed, Arya began to change. Her cries turned into coos, her random arm movements became purposeful reaches. The first time she truly smiled, not gas but a real smile, Maya froze. "Did you see that?" she gasped, even though she was alone. She grabbed her phone, calling Marcus immediately. She smiled. She actually smiled at me. On the other end, Marcus laughed. Of course she did. She knows her mom is amazing. There were still hard days. Days when Maya felt every one of her 49 years. Days when Arya had a mild fever and panic took over. Days when exhaustion made her short-tempered, and guilt followed right behind it. One evening, after a particularly long day, Maya sat on the nursery floor and cried quietly while Arya slept in her crib. "I wish he could see you," she whispered, glancing at Daniel's framed photo on the shelf. Grief doesn't disappear just because joy arrives. It simply changes shape. But instead of breaking her, the grief began to feel like fuel. Daniel's absence was no longer just pain, it was motivation. She would tell Arya about him one day, about his laugh, his kindness, his stubborn optimism. She would make sure her daughter knew that she was born from deep love, even if that love had crossed time itself. At 6 months old, Arya surprised everyone. Maya had placed her on a soft blanket in the living room while folding laundry. Suddenly, she heard an unusual thump. She turned around. Arya had rolled over, fully, confidently, and was staring at her as if waiting for applause. Maya gasped. "No way, you did not just do that." She rushed over, laughing, clapping like a child herself. It was a small milestone to the world. But to Maya, it felt like another miracle. Every new development, every sound, every movement felt amplified because she had once believed she would never experience any of it. One evening, as the sun dipped low outside the window, Maya sat in her rocking chair, holding Arya close. The house felt warm and alive. She thought back to the night she almost didn't call the fertility clinic. What if she had let fear win? What if she had decided she was too old? What if she had listened to the quiet voice that said, "It's too late"? Her life would look completely different and emptier. Instead, she had chosen courage, not because she wasn't scared, but because she was. Now, when people ask her for advice, she doesn't speak like a celebrity. She speaks like a woman who has walked through fire and come out holding something precious. Life doesn't follow a schedule, she tells them. Love doesn't expire, and dreams don't have an age limit. She doesn't pretend the journey was easy. It wasn't. There were hospital bills, hormone injections, emotional breakdowns, judgmental looks, sleepless nights. But there was also Arya's first laugh, her tiny fingers gripping Maya's hand, her soft breathing against Maya's chest in the middle of the night, and that made everything worth it. As Arya approaches her first birthday, Maya feels something new growing inside her. Not fear, not grief, but anticipation, because this story, their story, isn't just about one miracle birth. It's about what happens next, and something unexpected is about to test her strength in a way she never saw coming. But that is only the beginning of what life has planned for Maya and little Arya. The day everything changed again started like any other, quiet, ordinary, peaceful, and that's what made it so unexpected. Arya was almost 1 year old. She had just learned how to stand while holding onto the couch. her tiny legs shaking with determination. Maya was in the kitchen blending vegetables when she heard a soft thud, followed by silence. Not a cry. Silence. Her heart dropped. She rushed into the living room. Arya was sitting on the floor, wide-eyed and confused. A small red mark was forming on her forehead where she had bumped the coffee table. For a second, Maya couldn't breathe. Then the cry came. Loud, dramatic, powerful. Maya scooped her up immediately, checking her head, her arms, her eyes. "You're okay. You're okay. Mommy's here," she whispered, though her own hands were shaking. It was a small accident. Children fall, it happens every day. But for Maya, that moment unlocked a deep fear she had been quietly carrying for months. What if something happens to me? At 50, she was not a young mother anymore. The thought of leaving Arya alone in this world terrified her more than anything ever had. That night, after Arya finally fell asleep, Maya sat at the dining table staring into the dark. Daniel's old photo frame stood across the room. "I need to make sure she's always safe," she whispered. And that's when she made another life-changing decision. The next few weeks were filled with paperwork and serious conversations. Maya met with a lawyer to arrange guardianship plans. She updated her will. She organized financial security for Arya's future. Marcus and her sister were both included in the plan. It wasn't easy to think about worst-case scenarios, but it gave her peace. Because being brave doesn't mean pretending fear doesn't exist. It means preparing anyway. But life wasn't done surprising her. Just 2 months before Arya's first birthday party, Maya received a call from her doctor after a routine checkup. "There's something small we want to monitor," the doctor said carefully. Those words, they echoed like a ghost from her past. Brain tumor, hospital, Daniel. Maya's chest tightened. The tests showed it was not serious, just a minor health issue that required monitoring and lifestyle changes. Nothing life-threatening, but the emotional wave it triggered was intense. For days she barely slept, not because of Arya this time, but because trauma leaves shadows. One evening, while rocking Arya to sleep, Maya realized something powerful. 10 years ago, fear had taken over her life when Daniel got sick. Now, she refused to let fear control her again. She scheduled follow-ups. She improved her diet. She started light exercise. She took care of herself, not out of vanity, but out of responsibility. She wanted to be there for school mornings, for teenage drama, for graduation day, for everything. Then came Arya's first birthday. Maya went all out. Soft pink decorations filled the backyard. Close friends gathered. Daniel's family attended, smiling through emotional eyes. A small table held framed photos, including one of Daniel holding Maya years ago. As everyone sang happy birthday, Maya held Arya close. 1 year, 1 full year of midnight feedings, first smiles, tiny victories, and quiet tears. When Arya smashed her hand into the cake and giggled, the entire yard burst into laughter. And in that moment, Maya felt something shift permanently. She was no longer the grieving widow who had taken a chance. She was simply Mom. Later that night, after the guests left and the decorations fluttered softly in the warm air, Maya sat alone on the porch holding a sleeping Arya. She looked up at the stars. "I did it," she whispered again. But this time, the words meant something deeper. She hadn't just given birth to a child. She had rebuilt her life, piece by piece, through doubt, through judgment, through exhaustion, through fear. And she realized something important. Courage isn't loud. It's quiet. It shows up in hospital waiting rooms, in fertility clinics, in 3 a.m. feedings, in legal paperwork no one talks about, in choosing hope when giving up would be easier. As Arya grows, Maya makes a promise to herself. She will tell her daughter everything one day. About the father who loved her before she was even born. about the frozen dream that waited 10 years, about the night she almost gave up, but didn't. Because this story isn't just about late motherhood. It's about resilience. It's about second chances. It's about refusing to let time decide what is possible. Today, when women write to her saying, "Is it too late for me?" Maya always answers the same way. If your heart still believes in it, then no, it's not too late. She doesn't promise it will be easy. She doesn't promise it will be perfect. But she promises that regret is heavier than fear. And sometimes, the bravest thing you can do is try. As the house grows quiet and Arya sleeps peacefully in her crib, Maya turns off the lights and pauses at the doorway. For a second, she listens to the soft rhythm of her daughter's breathing. 10 years ago, she thought her story had ended in a hospital room. But it hadn't. It was only waiting, waiting for the right time, waiting for the right miracle. And now every laugh that echoes through her home is proof of one simple truth. Never give up on the dream that still lives inside you, because life is short, love is powerful, and sometimes the most beautiful chapters begin when the world thinks the story is already over. And that is the end of this journey. But for Maya and little Arya, it's only the beginning. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this story, please give it a thumbs up and share it with your friends.